Good afternoon. I'm David Snyder, President and CEO of the Economic Club of Chicago. And on behalf of our members and guests, I'm honored to welcome as today's speaker, Margo Georgiadis, President and CEO of Ancestry. I'm joined by Economic Club board member, Christine Leahy, who will moderate today's discussion. Our program will start with a conversation between Margo and Chris, and during that time, we encourage you to send us your questions or upvote a fellow member's question by using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We hope to pose at least 3 of the most requested questions during the latter part of the program. Also, the chat function is available for members to interact during the discussion. And please note this conversation is being recorded and will be posted on the club's YouTube channel at a later date. We encourage you to share the entire program or clips of key highlights with colleagues, business partners, and others in your broader social media network. Now, it's my pleasure to formally introduce our moderator and our guest speaker. Christine Leahy serves as President and CEO of CDW, a leading multi-brand technology solutions provider to business, government, education, and healthcare customers in the United States, the UK, and Canada. In addition to being CDW's first female CEO, she is also one of the few women CEOs to run a Fortune 500 company. Leahy has held numerous roles at CDW, most recently serving as Chief Revenue Officer, where she was responsible for all the company's customer-facing units, including its corporate, public, small business, international, and integrated technology solutions business. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Margo Georgiadis, President and CEO of Ancestry. Bringing together content, science, and technology, Ancestry is a human-centered company with a mission to empower journeys of personal discovery to enrich lives. For more than 30 years, Ancestry's global market-leading family history and consumer genomics products have enabled customers to discover their family story and actionable health insights. Margo's prior roles include CEO of Mattel and President of America at Google, where she directed the commercial operations and advertising sales. She's also held leadership positions at Google, Discover Financial, and McKinsey & Company. A Chicago native, Margo is a champion of organizations that inspire girls to pursue education and careers in STEM and advancing the next generation of women leaders. She's received multiple awards for her business and community leadership and has been named one of Fortune's 50 most powerful women in business. Margo, thank you for joining us. And Chris, I now turn things over to you.
Thanks so much. And Margo, it's great to be here with you. I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you. Ancestry is such a relevant company in this historic period of disruption. And I'm so excited to hear about the rich tapestry of services that Ancestry delivers and how you've been managing during this year of 2020, if I could say it that way. So I'm going to get started and dive right in. And I think I'll start with just a little bit of a general question. Although people may know Ancestry by name, many I think are really unaware of the depth and the breadth of the company's services. So it'd be great if you could highlight what Ancestry is, the offers, tell us about the company, and how you came to be the largest consumer DNA database in the world.
Well, thanks, Christine. It's really great to be back with my hometown Chicago crowd. I wish it was in person, but I know that we're all kind of living through this COVID moment together, but really excited to be in the Chicago community as much as I can. Ancestry, I think everyone, for 3 years in a row, we were the largest selling holiday gift on Amazon with our DNA kits. And I think, a lot of people think we're a DNA company, but actually, as David said earlier, this is a deeply human-centered company. We've been around for 30 years, bringing together content, science, and technology to enable these powerful journeys of personal discovery. We actually are the global leader in 2 businesses, and actually our core business that really anchors the company is a well over $1 billion subscription service, where people come into a powerful collection, the world's largest collection of digitized historical records. We actually have 28 billion records in 30,000 collections that have been amassed. And over these 30 years, we've built over 115 million family trees that have 13 billion ancestral connections. So what really happens is people come into with this beautiful subscription service with this hugely engaged community of passionate family history explorers. And there are millions of them from over 120 countries all over the world. And we got into consumer genomics in 2012, and we have become also the global leader in that industry with over 18 million people in our network. And we really got into consumer genomics many years ago, but we really pursued it as the cost of DNA sequencing came down, and we could provide people a compelling, fast on-ramp into their family history research, regardless of how much they know. And so what's exciting for our members is that they have access in this 18 million person network to over 1 trillion different connections. So your opportunity to discover where you're from, as well as to break through brick walls in your ancestral research, is kind of unprecedented in humanity. And so that's really exciting for us. And then more recently, we entered personalized preventive health, and we now provide the most comprehensive and affordable genetic screening services available anywhere. And our goal is to really help consumers collaborate with their doctors and get on the path to personalized preventive health. So it's an exciting time for us. And obviously, in the midst of this crazy pandemic, we're really grateful to be an anchor for many people right now.
Yeah, it's really expanded since the holiday gift giving season years ago, as you mentioned, Margo. Well, as we think about the period we're in, and Ancestry's response early in the pandemic, you were instrumental in exploring ways to leverage Ancestry's team of scientists and other resources that you talked about in the relationships to support the efforts to combat COVID-19. Can you tell us a little more about those initiatives and how you've been contributing to the nation's current and prospective COVID responses and the recovery landscape generally?
Well, I think every company and every industry, I know yours as well, Christine, has been deeply affected by this crisis, and we're all looking for ways to make a difference. This is a moment where we all need our collective humanity and to come together to serve others. And I've been incredibly inspired by our Ancestry team's commitment. We're a very mission-driven company, and they've been unbelievably creative in reimagining how we could use our many assets for good to help with the problems that are facing all of our communities. We saw right at the onset when kids were sent home, parents really trying to educate their kids at home. And so we have always had a K-12 education program, and we cobbled together and figured out how to provide that for free to all parents, across the country, to make it much more immersive and engaging for kids and parents to learn about history. And this fall, we really thought about all those teachers working remotely, and many of them had reached out to us about gaining access to Ancestry. And so again, we found a way to provide all K-12 educators free access to all of Ancestry's historical records and collections from their homes so that they could work and really inspire kids from home. And we're also working with them to refresh our entire K-12 curriculum, because I think we realize this is going to go on for a while. And so we're really trying to lean into that future. We've also thought a lot about the tremendous isolation people have felt being at home. And family history is such a powerful way for people to feel a sense of purpose and connection. And so we wanted to give as many people as possible the chance to go on that journey, regardless of their ability to pay. And so we partnered with the National Archives, and we've provided millions and millions, over 500 million free records accessible to anyone so that they can go and have those discovery. And we took our 150 professional genealogists and we started providing free online classes so that whether you're new to this habit or an hobby, or you're more advanced, how do we help you? We also thought about important moments of remembrance. I think one of the hardest things with the pandemic has been the fact that we can't get together. And on Memorial Day, it's the 75th anniversary of World War II and the Greatest Generation. We really wanted to be able to celebrate their incredible contributions to our society. And so we worked with the Department of Defense, the Wounded Warriors, the History Channel to put together a virtual Memorial Day parade. And we were so pleased that many celebrities and others with connections to military history came together and supported it. And then of course we have an amazing world-class science team in this 18 million person genomics network. And so what we've really been focusing is how can we contribute to the advancement of science? And we did that by taking the power of that network, and we've created the largest live study, over 750,000 people that are participating in a live research study that connects genetics to all the broader phenotypic information. So your exposure, what medications you might be on, all sorts of important information. And we've already made 3 novel discoveries about the linkage between genetics and who's more likely to get infected or have a severe reaction to COVID. And that discovery rate, as well as our collaboration with leading qualified researchers, we hope can contribute to advances in COVID-19. So I'm really proud of the work that the team has done.
So Margo, you'll probably get this question at the end, so I might ask it now. In terms of the genetic linkages, can you talk a little bit about what was discovered?
So, we're really excited about the early findings from the research, and we're obviously continuing to look for more discoveries. We've confirmed the 2 previously reported genetic associations, those that have been well published around the A, B, and O blood groups. But we've discovered 3 additional regions in the genome that are associated, as I said, with increased risk of infection or severe symptoms. I don't know how much people really want to geek out here if you're really into genetics, but these are the genes that are known to be involved in immunoresponse and viral replication. So like SRM1, it's involved in HIV replication, and we found a rare variant in this region that's associated with more severe symptoms of COVID-19. We've also looked at some of the proteins related to antibodies, and we found some additional things that are associated with increased susceptibility to getting infected with the coronavirus. We've also looked at some of the binding proteins. It's influenza virus NS1A, for those of you who aren't super geeky, but that's associated with primary immune function. And so as we identify that, it actually happens to be more activating in men. And so as we gain all these insights, we're able to collaborate with the scientific community to better target and support those that are most at risk of both infection and more severe response.
And staying on the scientific side, do you foresee Ancestry continuing to have a future role in coordinating with the scientific community, similar to what you've been doing during the pandemic?
Well, clearly, family health history and your genetics are some of the most powerful signals in personalized preventive health. And as a company, we do believe that people are needlessly suffering and dying of conditions that are treatable. And so we are going to continue to work to provide affordable, comprehensive screening and insights in collaboration with the healthcare system and qualified researchers, because we truly believe that prevention is possible. And we all just imagine if we would have had, from the early outbreaks, say over in Asia, the ability to understand the sequencing data and these risk factors quickly, we could have really helped provide much better guidance about who really needs to stay at home, who might need to receive a vaccine faster, how we could advance development of new therapies. And so we really hope to be a valuable part of that going forward. But again, we're one piece of a very important ecosystem. What really matters is that we're all collaborating in new and different ways, really compelled by that pandemic to push ourselves to think about how we can all use our assets for good.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and this has been, I call it almost a historic period of collaboration among public and private institutions,
Absolutely.
Which one hopes will continue as we move forward. So Ancestry has been around for 30 years, and certainly there's been much this year to drive innovation, but how do you lead an organization like Ancestry in continually innovating, driving new services, contributing to the community as you're doing now? What's the secret of the organization's success there?
Well, Ancestry, with its deep mission focus, has been the consistent category leader and innovator for 30 years. And the cornerstone of that is really the fact that we wake up every day thinking about how we can help more people make more discoveries than ever before. I think a lot of people don't know that Ancestry is one of the few companies to lead through multiple tech cycles. So we actually started out as a magazine publisher, and then we were the first company to go do CD-ROMs of historical content. And then we realized the internet opened up new opportunities to provide more access to that digitized content. First company to 1 million subscribers, even before Netflix. In fact, we were one of the early subscription companies when we were public. They didn't really even know how to value us or what to do with us. Now subscriptions seem very commonplace, but when we first started out, that actually wasn't true. And then we saw forward into mobile, into DNA, and now into AI and machine learning. And I think it's that centralized customer obsession that we have of how can we make this easier? How does technology become an enabler? And I think that's important. There's so many great companies in Chicago as we think about how every company can embrace technology to be an enabler to breaking through boundaries and making more things possible for their users, making things simpler and easier. And so, we're just excited about the future and all the things that we can do to make discovery even better.
Well, Margo, you mentioned earlier, and as a kind of follow-on to the innovation question, you say that Ancestry's long-term goal is to bring personalized preventative health to fruition. So can you tell us a little more what that looks like as a business, what that looks like as a consumer, and different end markets?
Well, we're still in the very early days, but our hope is that 5 years from now that everyone will be empowered with a smart, personalized plan to stay healthy and to manage their risks in collaboration with their healthcare providers. We want consumers to feel in control of their health and proactive prevention to be the norm. And our goal is to provide the most comprehensive ongoing screening, family health history, genetics, and obviously many other things that can be integrated with that to make this possible simply and seamlessly for consumers. And our view is that the impact on society can be huge. We can offer better quality of life for people, a better experience for doctors, enabling them to give more personalized attention the way they crave to do it for their patients, and how we can better manage our healthcare costs, particularly as we shift as a society more to outcome versus fee for service.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that leads to another question. I'll call it kind of ethical questions around genetics, et cetera. And can you share what some of the bigger ethical questions Ancestry has considered since you came on board? And how did you go about considering them, answering them, mitigating against possible unintended consequences of genetic research, et cetera?
Well, I think every company in every industry is focused on consumer privacy and consumer trust. At Ancestry, for us, it starts with a consumer-centric business model and our interests always being aligned with our consumers. The customer at Ancestry is never our product, and our relationships last a lifetime and often across generations. And so when you think about many of the topics that have been raised around consumer control over their data, how data is being used, this for us at Ancestry, it's a cornerstone. We've long been a vocal proponent of robust consumer privacy and data protection because consumers trust us with their most personal and precious information. We take that privileged role really seriously. It's their data, and it's our job to put them in control, to keep things simple, make it transparent, and give them choices at every step of the way. And I think that's really been what a lot of the dialogue has been about. It's about choices and no surprises. And for us at Ancestry, that's what we've been doing for 3 decades. But we also believe that being an industry leader comes with responsibility. And we have to step up and be part of ensuring that the broader framework, even when one doesn't exist, is put in place. And so we led a lot of work with the industry, including the Future Privacy Forum, which is an independent group, which helped us work with all the players in the industry to set up the first set of practices in direct-to-consumer testing. And so we really think it's important as a leader to push that forward. We also believe in transparency, and we provide an annual transparency report. A lot of the ethical questions that have come up have been around law enforcement and how people's data might be shared in ways that they did not intend. And for us at Ancestry, we don't sell or share data with any insurers, employers, third-party marketers, anyone like that. Law enforcement would actually have to be a request that come in. It has to meet all the standards. And I'm proud to say that we've actually never shared anyone's data with law enforcement. The legal framework is very clear in terms of needing to provide justification. And so we really protect our consumers' privacy, and we put that paramount in everything we do every day.
So Margo, let me ask, because the question's been raised. You've talked, you've really highlighted the depth of the values and culture and standards at Ancestry, but with the recent announcement of Blackstone Group plans to acquire Ancestry, some have questioned the continuing protection around privacy. How would you respond to that?
Well, Christine, thank you for asking that question. You know, consumer trust and privacy protection, as I said earlier, they're built into everything we do. And our commitment to robust consumer privacy protection and data ownership held by the consumer does not change under new ownership by Blackstone. Consumers will always be in control of their data. And in fact, I think it's important to emphasize that, you know, we obviously have a definitive agreement with Blackstone. We haven't closed, but in every discussion I've ever had with them, they are deeply committed to our mission and our privacy practices. And so we do not expect to change anything in the way we do business, which we hold at the highest standard and always consumer-centric.
Great. Well, if I could just pivot a little bit, if you're okay with that, to your own personal professional journey. You know, you have obviously had a wide breadth of experience across different companies, different industries, and it would be wonderful if you could share just highlights of your career journey and maybe some of the important lessons that you've learned along the way.
Well, you know, I just feel honored to be in front of this group. For me, when I think about my career, it's all been about being a mission-driven executive, how technology and data can transform products and experiences to drive accelerating growth and returns. And that's been consistent at every step in my career, whether it was being at Discover, a great Chicago company, and helping reimagine financial services in a more consumer-first way, going to Google, organizing the world's information, at Mattel, transforming play to inspire the next generation of creators and leaders, and now at Ancestry, right, democratizing access to everyone's family story and really pursuing the foundation for personalized preventive health. And on that journey, I've learned a lot of amazing lessons and had exposure to some of the most phenomenal thinkers in the world. But what have I learned throughout my career is to follow your passions and people. You know, if you love what you do and who you do it with, you're going to be better at it. You know, look for those boundary pushers. Who are those people that are going to challenge you? I also think it's really important. We all forget that we have to take risks to reinvent ourselves, you know, be curious forever. And, you know, I think about a great saying from Ray Kroc, who's the founder of McDonald's: when you're green, you grow; when you're ripe, you rot. And I think the minute you start feeling comfortable, it's time to think about, are you pushing yourself? Are you thinking about maybe working in another industry where you could learn a new pattern? Have you really had a good international experience? We live in a global world and we all need to have a broader perspective. Or have you tried a new function that might be adjacent and really expand your portfolio? And last, I think a lot of people have talked about this. You know, successful people don't get lucky, they make their own luck. They put themselves in the path of opportunity. And I think that's not just in your work, but it's also in what I've always loved about Chicago. It's in your community service. And I think some of the most incredible mentors that I've had over my career are people that I've met through pursuing shared passions in the community, you know, communities like Chicago.
Margo, that's great advice. I particularly like, and I think it's incredibly relevant now for organizations as well as individuals to continue to stay green and not get ripe. So that's I'll keep that close to my heart. A question about types of organizations. You've worked at a number of companies where the service or product is a household name. Are there any unique challenges in stewarding companies that are, you know, very well-known household names?
Well, I think whenever you lead a company that's well-known, right, with that great leadership also comes responsibility. You are in the spotlight. You are expected to be a standard setter and a pace setter. And there's a lot of people that are going to both support you, but also challenge you. And I welcome that. I think a big piece of leadership is making sure you don't have blind spots. And so for me, it's always leaning on the edge of your seat, always trying to make the company better, but also being willing to listen. and being willing to hear, right, other perspectives and make sure, that you're making the best contribution that you can to your customers and to your communities.
Well, we're all the beneficiaries and delighted that despite various cities that you've lived in and moved to, you've remained a real central part of the Chicago business community, longtime resident here and born and bred. What is your perspective on how best to rebuild Chicago's economy and reputation after the recent unrest as well as COVID? And I would just add, as a technology haven of the world.
Well, I still think back to when I was a partner at McKinsey and I worked with the amazing Michael Kraus on the future of the city as a technology center. And I now look at some of the new initiatives and I see a lot of the same things when we think about being a technology community. Chicago has some of the most incredible assets and capabilities. And I do believe from a technology perspective, it's really about keeping some of those resources at home, making sure that we have the access to the capital and the other support systems so that all the innovation that's spewing out of our universities all over the state are benefiting and really staying in the community versus feeling like people need to go elsewhere to gain access to capital and resources. In addition, I think when we think about it, it's been hard for all of us to watch some of the challenges in the Chicago community. And I'm a huge believer in Chicago. It's an amazing city. It's a place where people as leaders generally care about each other and they want to give back to the community. And I think we need to really live up to our Big Shoulders legacy and become a model for public-private partnership to solve the inequities that underlie what's happening in those recent events. Certainly COVID has laid bare even more dramatically the inequities that we all see in our society. And we have great leaders in Chicago, and we know how to create an open dialogue about the real issues and to create an action plan for progress across education and access to opportunity that I truly believe can be a model for the nation, because Chicago is, as we always said, a city that works. And so I think we all need to step up as leaders and make sure we're part of that solution.
Margo, I love that. And I love your reference to Chicago as a city that's, caring and drives connection. And earlier we talked about the current state of isolation that many people are feeling. Last week when we talked, you shared some great stories about how Ancestry drove real meaning in people's lives, drove connection in incredibly meaningful ways. Would you mind sharing a story or two?
As we look at, what's happened during COVID, I think as a company, we've just been incredibly moved by the outpouring. And 10 out of our 10 markets, we've seen an acceleration in the number of people subscribing to our service. And, I think that's really driven by an innate human need to understand where and who we're from. Every piece of research we've ever done shows that 4 out of 5, people is interested in understanding more. But I think what's different now in the use of accelerating Ancestry is that the pandemic has created a moment of reflection for all of us, a refocus on family and meaningful connections. And it's also created the gift of time, the time to pursue things we've always wanted to do. And I think meaningful content experiences like Ancestry are winning share of mind. And people are looking, as you said, for meaning in the chaos, a greater sense of connection and inspiration. And I think family history research is an incredibly powerful place to find this. And our research shows that after learning about the stories of the ancestor and exploring their trees, almost 80% of Americans feel a greater sense of connection and belonging. And we know that's something that really is important right now. And the vast majority, 90% of Americans believe that there are lessons from the past that can help us change how we live our lives today and make change for the future. And when I think about the letters that I receive every day, I see that in real life. I think one of the most powerful I received was from a business school classmate of mine who sent me a long letter talking about how she was embarking on her family history research. And she's African-American, and there's a lot of roadblocks in that research, given the difficulty when people were enslaved. And she ran into, actually through this research, she ended up connecting with the family of the people that actually enslaved her family, but eventually had freed them at the end. of the Civil War. And what was incredible is they ended up all coming together at that same location, all those families getting together and having a moment. She sent me the picture from that moment where they had a real open human conversation about what had happened, what it meant to each of them, and how they all wanted to go forward together. And so it's moments like that, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked up, that really, that really show you what's possible when people open themselves up to different perspectives.
Margo, first of all, I appreciate the sentiment and the emotion you're showing, because given the increasing divides in our global community, it seems that Ancestry is one of those incredibly powerful tools to bring and connect people around the globe in a way that is just incredibly rich and meaningful. And I think particularly, again, in this environment, that connection and community, when there are so many obstacles to it, is really admirable and incredible. I know we're going to move to questions soon. I want to ask you one more if I could. And I know Blackstone's not closed, but some folks are wondering what your next big personal challenge might be. So, and you might say you're happy doing what you are and you're going to stay focused, but is there anything on the horizon in particular?
Well, I'm just so honored to have the opportunity to lead a company like Ancestry. And we have just so much opportunity. While we provide a great experience for many, we still have a lot of work to do at Ancestry to truly fulfill our mission of democratizing access to everyone's family story. And it's such an amazing opportunity to apply, technology. This is I think of one of the most beautiful examples of AI machine learning being used for good to truly enable everyone to find their family story, even the difficult ones. And so I'm very passionate about that work, as well as the potential in personalized preventive health. So I'm really excited about the future and just excited about being part of this amazing company and team.
Margo, do you see differences by generations in terms of how consumers think about the Ancestry services, their own family connections, their history?
What's incredible to us is the interest in Ancestry is truly one of the few tech products that transcends across generations. And what's interesting is, while it has historically, the hobby of genealogy has been something that's been more in the 45 plus, because that's kind of when you have time, your kids maybe have gone off to school and you're thinking about those ways that you can feel connected and you want to bring great stories to your grandchildren about their family. But what we've seen is more and more young people embrace family history, particularly during COVID. And I think it's because this tech-savvy, content-loving generation has been given the time and the space, and they're really seeking that sense of belonging and connection, right? When you particularly think about that younger generation, it's more diverse than it's ever been. And so this need to really understand your story, to have that kind of open dialogue and connection by understanding yourself, it's scientifically proven that you become more confident, open, and resilient. And I think we live in a society where we all want that. I think we're also all looking for hope. And our research shows that millennials are more motivated and empowered after learning about their ancestors overcoming adversity versus any other group. And for me, that's actually very inspiring as I think about the generation that's going to lead the future of our country, their willingness to embrace and to create this open dialogue so that we can all live in a society that is more open.
That's a great learning there, the impact on resiliency. That's really fascinating. Margo, what about yourself and your family? Have you learned anything interesting about your own history that you'd be willing to share?
Well, I must admit, one of the reasons I took this job is that understanding our family story was a part of growing up. We grew up in a multi-generational household. In fact, my grandmother lived in our house for almost a decade. And so for my kids, they grew up, she was born in 1912 and she'd seen a lot. And she really, really imbued that passion for family, passing down those heirlooms, talking about that. And actually my grandmother was really so into her family come to the country in the 1700s, and she always had this feeling of being the original. But yes, I can tell you, and I think my dad actually may even be here watching, that his family actually came in the 1600s first. So if my grandmother was still alive, it would be kind of fun for my grandparents to now know that, my dad's side of the family actually came to the US first in Boston. So that was kind of fun.
Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to ask you another question about if there are differences or similarities. So we talked about generations. Do you see any differences based on cultural variations across the world?
It's remarkable. As COVID kicked in, we saw 10 out of 10 markets globally, our big markets, accelerate all organically at the same time. And I think this, craving for belonging, this focus on family, I think we're seeing a fundamental shift in people's mindsets and behaviors of revaluing their time, revaluing the quality of their connection with their family. And I believe that, ancestral research and this understanding of history, understanding our past to inspire our future is, I think, going to be a trend that's going to last, hopefully, for a long time. And I think if it does, hopefully we'll benefit from that as a collective society. At least that's what we hope for as a company.
Well, this has been a great discussion so far. We have a number of questions from our members, and I'm going to spin through, Margo, as many as we possibly can. And I'm going to start with a question from member Hill Hammock. And he was very curious about Ancestry's aspirations in India and China, and whether from a cultural and governmental perspective, whether you believe those two countries are receptive to the type of services Ancestry delivers.
Well, thank you for the question. And ultimately, our goal, is to provide the same experience for everyone across the world. And it's true that record access is not equal in all countries. In fact, one of the foundations for ancestral research is access to the census. And for example, in India, given the scale of the population, they have not been able to maintain that. But there are other ways in which over time we hope through some of our DNA work and other legacy records that have been passed down to provide an enriched experience for people from that region. China is really a unique story. During the Cultural Revolution, understanding your ancestry was actually forbidden because it had been such a tribal country. But fortunately, some of those records, which enable that to be traced back, were saved. And they're now being digitized. And there's a few organizations in China with the support of the Shanghai Library and the government that are enabling this. And so there's a massive interest actually in China for people and the diaspora from China for people to be able to understand their family stories. And so we've been talking with how we might be able to collaborate with some of those groups so we can enable people to make those very important and meaningful connections about their heritage.
Do you see a specific opportunity for Ancestry to enter those markets?
In each one of those cases, we look at every market on a case-by-case basis. We look at the ability to access the data and the timing. Ancestry actually did have an office, I think it was way before my time, in China, and it was difficult in that period, but we do see a more significant openness to being able to gain access to some of that information today.
As Ancestry continues to become a global company, what are the untapped markets where you see, immediate potential to expand your footprint?
So as a company, obviously, we've focused heavily on the immigration markets, right? The US, Canada, Australia, big presence in the UK, also Germany, and we continue to expand across Europe. And we believe that's a huge opportunity for us to strengthen because there's so much emigration that went both ways, the network effects for people to discover more and more as we expand. We've also digitized 10 generations of Catholic Church records in Mexico, as well as into the Caribbean. And so we're excited about providing a phenomenal experience for the incredible Latin population, both in South America, but also in the US, and we'll be continuing to build out more countries in Latin America, more access to more records over time. And then of course, Asia is a huge opportunity. So we have, as I said earlier, there's a lot of work to be done. We're at the beginning of what we believe is a really, really important journey. But when you think about the global world that we live in and the opportunity to enable people to connect all over the world and find those family stories, both people alive as well as the history. It's deeply important.
A question from Tobin Richter again about your business model. He has an interest in multi-generational retention of family records housed on Ancestry. And he was wondering if, one generation or part of a family is not interested in maintaining their subscription, how does that information and legacy go from one generation to another, even if one generation doesn't participate?
So when people build their family trees on Ancestry, when they make them public, that information will be preserved forever. Obviously, if it's private to only their family, then they would need to pass that down just within their family. The vast majority of the members of our family history community choose to make their work public, and therefore other people over time, right, will connect into those trees and discover things together. And that really helps to create that vibrant, forever preserved record. And so we do believe this is a really important legacy asset for families. So if someone lapses their subscription, their information is still there waiting for them. And so we do believe that over time, just like people are starting to do with some of their social media accounts, they will actually pass down their Ancestry accounts. And we hope to be that, place that they feel comfortable discovering and preserving their family story.
So let's shift back home to Chicago for a moment. We have two questions, one from your friend Michael Krause, and then a related question from Hardik Bhatt. Chicago continues its quest to become a technology leader, and it's succeeded in some areas, maybe not so much in others. There's a major new initiative I'm sure you're aware of, which is P33. What is your advice to the Chicago technology leadership, and maybe more importantly to the broader business leadership here, in how we can propel Chicago to the next level of leadership in technology?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. I was honored, Penny Pritzker, who's been leading that initiative, invited me to a dinner in Silicon Valley that she gave to really gain input and feedback, from many of the leading executives and investors in the community. And I do think that a lot of the things that we talked about, at that dinner are a big piece of it, right? Ensuring that there is access to capital locally, that we do think about in Chicago, how we create the vibrant network, because there is something unique about Silicon Valley where you can have all the leading experts across these fields. It just creates, right, an incredible creative vibrancy. How does Chicago pick a couple of these really breaking out areas and become a hub for them, and really nurture that integrated velocity of learning that happens when you get that critical mass in an area or two, where all those companies can learn from and move talent around within that place. And I think, and then lastly, the university community is just so incredibly vibrant. How does the university community really collaborate more across, right, that group, have more cross collaboration and acceleration with the companies that are in the city? And that's something I clearly see when you look at in universities like Stanford and Berkeley and others. They are so involved in the technology community. It's so embedded, right? That it's almost, people move from companies to university and back, and there's this incredible vibrancy that I think is truly unique. But I see no reason, given the talent in Chicago, that could not occur also in Chicago.
So a couple of questions related to kind of your professional history, and Chris touched on this a little bit, but you've had the opportunity to work at some of America's greatest companies, McKinsey, Discover, Google, Ancestry, Mattel for a while. Tell us about the corporate cultures of each, and kind of what you picked up from each experience, and then what type, obviously you're at Ancestry now, but what are the qualities that you're looking for when you join a company? You'd mentioned that there's a passion and a mission for what you believe in, but give us a sense of the importance of corporate culture in terms of your career decisions in the past and going forward. And then as a follow-up, someone specifically wanted to know what the future of the toy business is.
Okay, well, that was a lot in one. So I'll try to unpack that a little bit. As I said, I do think every career choice I've made has really been driven by mission as well as stretching myself, as a leader. And so, when I think about, McKinsey was an amazing place, to start a career, very values-driven company, deeply passionate about the quality of the service it provided its customers. And for me, that really honed this passion for mission and collaboration and, frankly, executive humility, because we were there to help others be successful. And I think that shaped me a lot as a leader in terms of how I think about leadership. I'm very much focused on servant leadership. And when I went to Discover, I was really drawn by David Nelms. He was a really thoughtful business leader who was willing to think out of the box, but also embrace someone like me that was a little bit of a challenger, right? Who really wanted to push the company to make the brand iconic again, to really transform every aspect of our product and experience to make it more consumer centric. And he was unbelievably supportive. I really, what I saw at Google was, Larry Page and Sergey were just visionaries about how the world needed to change and how technology could create possibilities that were beyond our wildest imaginations. I still remember, after I worked there just a short amount of time, I remember calling my husband, that many of you know, and saying to him, I can't believe I get paid to do this job, right? I have to forget everything I learned. And it forced me to look at the world and possibilities in a completely different way. And that's what I really loved about Google and its culture, but also a lot of the same characteristics, extremely values-driven leaders that were very humble. It's not a culture of stars. It's a culture of pushing the status quo, pushing yourself, but doing it in a highly collaborative way. And so I think, if I look across every, place I've worked, Google, Mattel, Ancestry, this concept of culture, the way people work together, the values, the mission, all these things I think work together to create an atmosphere where people feel like they can be at their best. I believe organizations are best with a servant leader that empowers the organization against a really compelling mission to push and challenge the status quo and keep that pace of innovation. And so that's what I look for. That's what I try to build. And I've learned from truly some of the best leaders and how to craft that as a leader myself.
I'd be remiss if I didn't swing back to the toy question.
Well, the toy industry, it's a complicated time. I think people are always resilient in terms of wanting to do the best for their children as more people educate their kids at home. I truly believe that people do look at toys and play. If you look at the facts on it, if you talk to any truly successful executive in the technology space, the ability to have to use your imagination and to have to do the trial and error that comes with playing with toys is some of the most foundational experiences that you can have as a thinker. And this is, I think, extremely important versus, I think, a lot of the gaming and other things. They're also an interesting way for people to flex their muscles. But this experimentation that comes with the trial and error of play and the role playing that comes through a lot of the other types of toys is very, very, very important to social emotional development. And so I truly believe that the toy industry will always be vibrant. At the same time, the toy industry, as you can see, and I'm really proud of the team at Mattel for carrying out a lot of the work that we started, we fully have to modernize the way we think about play. Play for this next generation of consumers, we do need to integrate technology into that play experiences. Kids expect a three-dimensional experience. They want to have content. They want to have some kind of a digital integration, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't take away that experimentation, that creativity, and that imagination.
Right. Going to shift gears just to include as many member questions as possible. I think probably the vast majority of the people that are watching today's program are most likely watching from home. People are very curious about the advice that you have in terms of maintaining motivation and company culture during a time when people are alone, they're separate, they're not coming into the team. Mm-hmm. So if you could give us your best advice and then maybe tell us a little bit about how Ancestry is handling work during the COVID era and some lessons that we might learn from that.
Okay. Again, there's a lot in that question. Thank you, David. I can count on you for a loaded question. But, you know, I guess I'll go back to something we talked about before. I do feel a real new humanity in our lives and at work that I think will forever change the way work is happening for all of us. I think, you know, we've really seen the fact that we can work in new and different ways and be incredibly productive. Hybrid models are likely to stay, and I think we'll all travel more deliberately from here because we see that we thought we had to do things in person that we no longer have to do in person. I think the other thing that's really important is I think it's really challenged leadership to reimagine how we engage with our employees and how we engage with each other. And at Ancestry, you know, I've really tried to focus on how we can learn from the companies. And for anybody who's looking, there's a company called GitLab, which actually is a fully remote company. And they've actually posted a full manual on what they've learned about the best practices of a fully remote workplace. So I really recommend it anybody that is looking for best practices to look at their work. And I happen to be with the CEO of that company right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I literally called him like the day this happened and we all went remote and said, give me whatever you got. And I learned a lot through that there's a lot of benefits to remote working. And you can recreate a lot of the same experiences that we have in an office remotely, but you have to do it more deliberately. You have to really think about, as a leader, how do you still get that skip level feedback? How do you still have those water cooler moments? And also, how do you bring your employees together? And we've really reimagined how we do virtual events, how we do our monthly town halls, how we do our insight gathering as a leadership team down into the trenches so that we don't lose touch, with what's happening on the front lines. And I really believe that as a leader, we have to communicate differently. I found myself, since the beginning of the pandemic, I send a weekly email to all of our employees with an update. And I really think about what's important to me, what's important to the company, and not just about the business, but also about how we're working together and also how we feel. Because I think it's really important right now, as everyone's going through this kaleidoscope of emotions, that we're honest as leaders about the real challenges that we face. People trying to juggle kids at home while working. And I did a whole weekly email about all the tips from different people across the company about what people are doing to cope with this. We also, at the same time, will talk about our planning and what's working and where we can improve. We have other emails that focus on feedback from the front line. And so that level of leadership engagement, transparency, and conversation, I think, really has to be cultivated, because employees don't expect us to have all the answers, but they want to feel connected to the mission, to the leadership, and to all the reasons why. And so that's, for us, I think, what's been at the heart of what we've done as a company. And I think it's, really helping us. I guess the only way I can gauge it, we have a new employee survey coming out, but our last one was, I think, the highest survey result we'd ever had. And we took the feedback from that and tried to do even better. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in October.
So, as I mentioned in your introduction, you've had a strong personal and philanthropic interest in encouraging women and girls to become involved in STEM careers. You've been involved in this effort for some time now, and I'm just wondering whether over the arc of time that you've been involved, whether you're actually seeing more women enter STEM fields, and what indications you're getting from younger women or girls in terms of the trajectory, in terms of getting more women in the profession.
Well, I know this is actually a passion that both Christina and I share, so I'll encourage her to jump in on this one too. I think we're making progress, but not enough. And so we can't take our eye off this ball. The world is being reimagined with code. Literally every aspect of our lives is being reimagined with technology. And if half the workforce is not included in that, we are not going to come up with solutions that really work for everyone. And I think that's also for women and for minorities. And I think this is a conscious choice that we have to make as a society to include more people. And, you know, for me, I think, you know, the first most important thing women need to see is role models. And I think Christine and I are trying to be that and making ourselves more available to show people that these careers are possible. And I think if Christine looked at her organization, I looked at mine, when there are women in leadership, you see that the whole company's share of women rises. So I look at the share of my women in product and engineering at Ancestry is much higher than even it was at Google. And I think that's because when women see, when they can see her, they feel that they can be her. So I think, you know, we need to systematically look at where people are falling off. And we see it happening in middle school, right? As girls are not encouraged in math and science into high school. That is one of the most important places, really. And I've written some op-eds about this, making sure that computer science is considered a science for high school graduation. I'm quite astonished that that still isn't true in most states. I'm really proud of the governor of Utah, who actually was one of the first to actually make that move and to make computer science education mandatory in high school, because I think a lot of people fear it, but it's one of those things that when you get exposed to it and you see the creativity of it and the joy of it and the possibilities from it, that I think it attracts a much wider group of people. And then I think it's really important that we level the playing field. And I know Google recently announced a really great effort where people can go and get certificates, very low cost, can get certificates in full stack engineering, in UX, et cetera, and they're willing to use those as hiring credentials. And those courses are incredibly affordable. And so I think that can not only just help us in terms of getting more people to consider this by lowering the barrier, but it can also help people that are making mid-career changes into these really important fields that are transforming our world. And so, you know, I'm just as committed as I've always been to this, because I think it's about our shared future and everyone being included in it.
Margo, we could go on forever. There's many more questions from our members, but we will need to conclude today's program as much as we'd like to go on. So let me thank you again for your really insightful comments today, and Chris for your wonderful moderation of the discussion.